The following is a presentation of the Championship Racing Network.
Crossed Flags, a racing podcast. It's your midweek fix for racing news and information. Brought to you by the Championship Racing Network. Now let's head trackside to join your hosts, Steve West and Matt Nicholson.
Welcome to the latest edition of Crossed Flags here on this particular Wednesday, as we're in the middle of the month. How did we already make it pretty much into the middle of the month of June?
Don't know, but it's definitely getting warmer.
Ooh, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Welcome to Heat and Alabama. I'm Steve West. That's Matt Nicholson. Coming up here in just a couple of moments, we'll bring in our producer, young Molly. That's pretty much what the focus of this particular podcast is going to be about. But we've gotten a couple of headlines here. One that I found out just this morning. We haven't talked Formula E really on this show yet, but I will because they released their schedule for the 2024-2025 season. Past couple of years, their entire regular season, not including their preseason testing, it's all been contained in a year. Like, for example, all the races, all 17 scheduled races this year are scheduled within the calendar year of 2024. But when they first started, they would begin before the new year and continue on through, and that's exactly what they're going to go back to. Their new season, 2024-2025, will begin officially on December the 7th and then go into the new year, and they're coming back to the United States. They're not going to New York because that course that they had been running in New York is still dealing with construction nearby, so they're going back to Miami. And they're going to Homestead Miami Speedway. Little did you know, there is actually a road course available at Homestead Miami Speedway, which is in its current form, 11 turns and about 2.3 miles. Mm-hmm. That would make it one of the longest courses Formula E has ever run if they run the full course. I don't know whether they're going to do that or modify it.
Put them on the oval.
Well, I think it will. I think it'll partially include the oval.
Yeah, partially it does, yeah.
So we'll have to see exactly how this works out because we haven't gotten the details yet. In fact, the tickets aren't even on sale for that particular race yet. That's coming up. You can register for them. They'll be in Mexico City as well, and that's really about as close to the United States as they're going to get. So Formula E is out when later on this year we get to go back to Circuit of the Americas. They've decided to do something a little different. We've seen a lot of road courses all around the world have different attractions for the fans that are in the area. Heck, here at Barber Motorsports Park, they bring in a Ferris wheel. It's not a permanent fixture to Barber Motorsports Park, but they bring one in.
I think it was, for the longest time, it was the Ferris wheel that was at Michael Jackson's ranch in California.
You might be right.
I think it was.
But as it turns out, Circuit of the Americas is going to build something that pretty much, I think, has to be permanent. This is unusual. I got to give them credit. This is thinking outside the box. What are they going to build?
That would be a roller coaster.
They're going to build a roller coaster at Circuit of the Americas.
That's under construction now.
Which I'm sure will be the focus of the coverage when Formula One gets there because it won't be done by that point in time.
No.
Open for 2025 season, I guess?
Probably. I would say so.
It'd make it a lot of fun to go there.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to the details on this particular roller coaster. It's Texas. They're not going to build a small one.
No, they're not going to build a small one. I can't fathom a roller coaster at a racetrack.
It is. Yeah, I know.
Does it cross the track? Does it inside the track?
Go underneath the track? I don't know.
I don't know.
It is interesting. We'll have to see how it all works out. It's kind of fun as we have fun with TV screens in the background. Molly is really having a fit, so I'm trying to fill time. One other note here, and this is more commentary than anything else. On ESPN.com, Ryan McGee wrote an article talking about how the Stewart-Haas Racing sale of charters may actually cause something of a problem a little bit later on related to this whole charter situation because apparently NASCAR has said in the latest proposal they're not yet willing to make these charters permanent.
The statements from the sanctioning body get dumber and dumber and dumber by the minute.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean,
by the minute.
I don't understand what the problem is about making these charters permanent, and what we have seen over the course of a very short period of time. I mean, we've only been using charters, less than 15 years.
Yes.
And we got to a point where charters, NASCAR just gave them to the teams because you were grandfathered in. Mm-hmm. And we heard about the sale of a couple of charters in the $1 to $2, maybe $2.5 million area. Now, all of a sudden, Stewart Haas is selling theirs for the $20 to $25 million range, and last year, Spire Motorsports, now seemingly overpaid for the Live Fast charter, at $40 million, according to all reports.
Spire got jacked.
Yeah. Spire's going, wow, why didn't we wait a year?
Yeah.
But, hey, 20 to 25 million, 20 to 40 million, either way. That's a huge number.
That's a lot.
And that means that this is a significant investment for these teams. NASCAR, just make them permanent.
I mean, I don't see why not.
It doesn't make any sense why you would.
Yeah, makes none whatsoever.
So there you go. All right, since the beginning of this particular podcast, 15 shows ago, we have been promising to bring in our producer, Molly Robinson, and she admitted to us right off the bat she knew very little to nothing about racing. Am I wrong on this?
No, you're not wrong.
I'm just double checking and wanted to make sure that I had gotten that right.
Well, class is in session.
So we promised at some point in time that there would be the education of young Molly. And this is a perfect opportunity to do it because there aren't any other really big headlines. Mm-hmm. I mean, we gave you 3 headlines, and one of them was they're building a roller coaster at a racetrack. Kind of shows you that it's a slow week so far.
Yeah.
So we figured this was an opportunity for young Molly to get her feet wet in a couple of areas. Number one, find out a little bit more about us. Ask anything she would like about us. Ask anything she would like about racing in general or specific. And kind of get the young education. Plus, she gets the chance to continue her abilities and continue them along as an interviewer. Because, hey, if you're going to make a career out of this particular business, you got to know how to do that.
That is true.
Yep.
So, how many interviews have you done? First, let me go ahead and ask that.
I did a ton in college.
Okay.
I was constantly reaching out to people and asking, especially for class projects. And I worked for 2 radio stations in college, so I was always doing interviews for those 2. Whether it was an athlete, a broadcaster, or even, in my classes, if I had to write a story. I love, interviewing is my favorite part of the job. I love talking to people. Half the time I can't shut up.
Well, this ought to make it real interesting then, shouldn't it? All right. So we pretty much said that we were open books. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, I've put stuff out on the air that my wife said, really, you said that? So I'll let you know right now. You can ask a question. If it goes too far, I'll tell you. But I get the funny feeling you're going to keep it probably more on the professional side. I don't imagine there's going to be a whole lot of personal stuff in here.
Not really.
All right. So bring it.
So first, what I want to know is why racing? What is the background and basically what is the genesis? Why did you 2 decide, this is what I want to get into?
All right. That's too personal. I can't answer that question.
Yes, you can.
I will defect that way first.
Yeah. I got into racing as a young kid. Didn't really know what it was when we moved down here, and I was, 5, 6, 7 years old, had no idea. I basically knew baseball and football. That was it, because I watched baseball at my grandfather's feet. That's how I became a Red Sox fan. Learned about football from my mom, who, being from Texas, she was a Cowboys fan. So I kind of grew up. Well, I kind of grew up with the Tom Landry, Roger Staubach Cowboys.
Right, yeah.
And then all of a sudden I went, well, wait a minute, there's this team in the Boston area. And I suddenly started kind of switching, and it finalized, especially when Jerry Jones bought the team and fired Tom Landry in a very unceremonious way. And I've pretty much hated the Cowboys ever since. So you can apologize, but I'm not sorry about it. I was a fan of the Cowboys when the Cowboys were cool.
Yeah.
But my mom knew I also was into cars. So it started with collection of Matchbox and Hot Wheels cars. Mm-hmm. And she bought me 2 one day that made me suddenly realize, hey, there's this sport called racing out there. And one was the 88 Darrell Waltrip car. The other was the number 21 Wood Brothers car, David Pearson being the most notable one. And I would just start playing with those, and had a friend across the street. He'd always take the 21, so I'd take the 88, and that's how I became a DW fan. And then all of a sudden, here comes 1979. I know, a little before you were born. And that was the year when a massive blizzard socked in the East Coast, basically from Georgia and Alabama all the way up into New England. And there was nothing literally to do. And we mentioned this on the show last week. It wasn't like cable was all that prevalent at that particular point in time. So there wasn't much to do on this particular Sunday afternoon. And here comes CBS doing the first ever live flag coverage of the Daytona 500. And I was hooked at that point in time. And then I got into the business, and I always thought it would be really cool to try and figure out a way to marry the two of them. And when I got the opportunity now about 15 years ago to do a Saturday afternoon show on a radio station here in Birmingham, and was thinking to myself, I don't want to be the typical news talk, all political, hard news stuff on a Saturday afternoon. I'm thinking, people that are out on their boats, or they're out working in the yard and they got their headphones on, or they got the radio on the boat, and they don't want to hear that. They're wanting something lighter hearted. I thought, hey, I can give them a little bit of an update on some racing, and a 15-minute segment turned into a 2-hour weekend show and a podcast now. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of mine.
Well, really where it started for me is I never was really a kid that was into stick and ball sports. The first race I went to was in 1989 at Talladega in the middle of July. Yes, in the pits of hell.
Wow.
We sat in the infield in turn 2 in the back of a pickup truck, and only can see that little bit of the track. I was like, whoa. Okay, I like this.
Now, I like to say, I didn't realize how large Talladega was until I drove by it.
Oh, wait until you go in.
Wait till you go in.
Wait till you go in.
I saw the outside of it. I had no idea it was that big.
Yeah, wait until you go in.
She's got another thing coming.
Yeah, we're working on that one.
Got another thing coming, people. And then later on that July, at the end of July, went to a race that was at the old BIR, Birmingham International Raceway. There was actually the old Chevron Dello Big Rig Series.
Nice.
Saw that race out there, and then I had to go. Mm-hmm. I had to go. So from 1989 until current day, I have not missed a weekend at Talladega.
Wow.
I've not missed a weekend. Both weekends every year. It doesn't matter if it's July, if it was May and July, April and July, April and August, April and September, whichever way the dates fell. My wife always jokes with me, you've got to go to camp meeting, like the old Baptist way of saying it. You've got to go to your camp meeting. Yep, we're going to camp meeting twice a year. And then that evolved into just a love for motorsports, period. Football got bigger as I started playing when I was in school. It got bigger, but baseball, stuff like that, I've never been big into that.
Yeah.
It's more football and motorsports. And then within high school, I started helping a really close friend of mine. He was a dirt racer and had a dirt race car. And started helping him. I helped him for, I think, 7 or 8 years on his car, him and his dad. Built several cars, built several engines, and then had the opportunity to purchase a car of my own and start my own driving career. Mm-hmm. So, and then it evolved, and I drove for 10 years until I had a catastrophic engine failure in a test session at Talladega. And then that was at the same year that my wife and I were expecting our first child. And then I was like, hey, let's pump the brakes on it. Let's let him get here. In which everybody that knows my story know that it went 15 ways to, what and back. But I've had the opportunity to be in a car every now and then, but that's where it came in for me. A one trip to Talladega in 1989 that started it and sealed it right there.
And the reason why I asked that question is because, I was kind of thinking back to my childhood, and, you hear like T-ball leagues and football leagues in your community, but I feel like, racing isn't as an accessible sport, especially for children. Like, I never heard of racing leagues throughout my childhood that me or my brother were able to get into.
Yeah.
If you get into the right scenario, like for example at Talladega Raceway Park, the go-kart track.
Yeah.
You see large amounts of kids out there getting their feet wet and learning. Mm-hmm. And then in that time period that I was down from not driving on my own, I started mentoring and helping a young kid out there that I've known him since he was born. We were fortunate enough to win a lot of races and win a series championship that year by helping him. And that really deepened it further for me, being able to help kids and mentor them, all while honing my own skills.
Right, yeah. That's so cool. And so you mentioned 1989 Talladega was your first race. And Steve, what was your first experience?
My first experience at Talladega was when I was tasked by a radio station out in Talladega to do what we would nickname MRN Light, Motor Racing Network Light, which was to go out there and on Friday be part of the ARCA Series coverage, which wasn't regularly covered by any particular network at that point in time, and then just fill in time with the radio station because they had a whole lot of local sponsors there. And I just got tagged with doing it, and I just kind of fell in love with it and found how easy it was to walk up to people who you might have thought were unapproachable. And that first week, I mean, I've been introduced to guys and brought in by guys who had been doing this for 5, 6, 7, 10, 15 years out at Talladega.
Right.
And I walk in with a guy who's been Dave McDaniel, who's been doing this probably for the better part of 15 years. And I'm suddenly getting names that has him on our little intercom going, "What? You got who?"
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I picked up Chad Knaus, who was the crew chief for Jimmy Johnson at that time. I got in touch with the now late, unfortunately, J.D. Gibbs, the son of Joe Gibbs, who was at the track. And two cool stories real quick about them. I got the attention of Chad Knaus when his car was going through final inspection. And all I did was once he looked at me, I just kind of questioningly pointed to the microphone. He said, "Sure, give me a minute." After the car came out, he was still dealing with the car, and I'm waiting, and I'm thinking, this may not happen. And then all of a sudden he stopped. He looked around, made eye contact with me, and went and walked right over to me. So he remembered it. You know, it wasn't one of those things like, yeah, I'll just kind of pacify the guy. J.D. Gibbs was talking with a whole group of people and said, give me about 5 minutes, and I'll be more than happy to give you some time. Walked up and talked to Kyle Busch's crew chief at the time, Steve Addington. And we had a conversation as we're walking down pit road. But when I got Steve Addington, and you always clicked on and you told the person who was producing the whole thing, "I'm Steve, got Steve Addington." As soon as I said that, Dave said, "I quit." Yep. So it was that kind of fun right there. And to be able to go from, that was the first ever NASCAR race I'd attended in person. So it took me a long time. But even before that, I had been asked to be a PA announcer at the old Birmingham International Raceway. And that was a lot of fun. And it just kind of affirmed that this was something that I wanted to be able to do. Mm-hmm. And then when Matt Coulter said, "Hey, I need a PA guy at Talladega Superspeedway," I'm your man. Yeah. And I've been there every race since 2007.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So now what I want to know with both of your careers, both in racing and in the booth, is there a certain moment, as you've gone out through your lives where you felt like it was extremely pivotal for you, or just something that might have really changed your perspective on the sport?
Because I thought when I was doing the fill-in that first weekend at Talladega in 2007 for Matt Coulter, I thought, really cool experience. I'd like to be back, but, I thought one weekend and done. It's great to be able to do it. When he called me back and said, "Hey, they liked you and they want you to be a part of it," that snapped it for me. So whether it was Christy King, who was my original boss, through Russell, and now, everything's kind of changing up again over there. But to have all of them insist that as much as Matt Coulter is cemented as the trackside announcer at Talladega, they want me cemented as the tower announcer at Talladega. And I've told everybody under the sun, including the general manager, Brian Crichton of the track, that, hey, I'm going to make you rename that booth after me. It'll become the Steve West Memorial PA booth.
As it should.
How many times have I heard that? Wow. Quite a few times.
I plan on making that happen. I really do.
Well, there's really two sides of it. It's from a driving career and from the sense of doing it on a public address side, running Wingman with Steve here. 2018. Yeah, 2018, from the PA side of it in the summertime, he sends me a message and says, "Hey, you got some free time today?" "Sure, what's up?" Russell and, at the time, Russell and Grant want to meet you at the track. For what? Huh? So I go out there, and then come to find out the other guy that was doing it with him just decided he wanted to be a fan for the race. He didn't want to do it. So he needed, really, you do need two people up there. And little did I know at the time that he had been talking to Russell and Grant like, hey, give him a shot. It really blindsided me. And I was like, okay. And at this time, this was the final race at Talladega for Dale Earnhardt Jr. Hard sellout. The whole time I'm sitting here thinking, don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up. I'm looking across 170,000 people in the stands and probably another 40 in the infield going, don't say nothing stupid. And him and Matt Coulter both gave me the best advice. You're talking to a black wall. You're talking to yourself at a black wall. Nobody's out there. And that actually helped calm me down. Just
That's
run,
good advice.
Just run with it. Do it like we do on the show. Run behind me. We'll be fine. It went way smoother than I thought it was going to go. And got some extremely positive feedback, not even a few days afterwards. You even got a message from Russell that said, good job, dude. I like that. You did really good. Okay, maybe I can do something somewhere with this. But from the driving side of it, it didn't come from the first win that I got, which was on Labor Day weekend in 2017. There was a 2-day show, and I swept the weekend. I got my first win. Won the next day as well, and then ripped off 5 straight after that. So ended up being on a 7-race winning streak because my mentor at the time, he always said, the hardest ones to get is the first one. Once you get that first one, it's going to be like clockwork. And then after I got that 7th straight, he said, I didn't mean rip 7 straight off. I was like, hey, they're there, take them. But probably, from a driving career, is when he passed away. It was in 2000, I think it was 2018. I can't remember the year exactly. But myself and his 2 sons and his grandson was competing in the same division. Well, I didn't tell anybody but Dad, and I told the guy that was in the flag stand at the time, I said, give me 1 extra pace lap because I'm about to do something. Because I've always said and I've always thought the best way when you have somebody that falls within the community of motorsports, the best way is not to pay tribute to them and to pay respects to them is not to do, you stand up on a certain lap or whatever car number they may have, or you may do stop on the racetrack or do whatever. The best way to do that in my eyes is you run the missing man formation. You see it in the military, you have I think it's the third jet in the 4-man formation will fall out and you have the 3rd man spot open. Well, in motorsports, what you do is if you're on the pole, you fall back 1 row and you leave the pole spot open and you do 1 extra pace lap. So I told the flagman and the guy driving the pace truck and Dad, I said, tell him give me 1 extra lap. So when we come around from the flag stand, we normally get 1 to go. I didn't see the 1 to go. I thought, all right, here we go. So I went down to low gear and backed up and fell back 1 row. And where his family was always standing at, I could look up and see them all wiping their eyes. They didn't know I was going to do that. That was my way of saying thank you for what you've done, how you showed me the ropes, how you showed me what to do. You gave me the advice that guided me to my first win. I'm going to fall back 1 row and run 1 lap. And my mom's got a picture of it, and I would have to go find it where she got it. And I was fell back 1 row, and his son that was driving his number car that he drove in his career was on the outside row, and that spot was open. That's probably, from a driving side, that was probably my best moment in my career.
Yeah, no doubt. That just gave me the chills.
Sure.
Because when you can drive by, when you fall back that row and you're running slower, and I told his grandson, I got out of the car on the grid. I said, I'm running 1 extra pace lap. You'll see why. Mm-hmm. When he seen me fall back and I glanced over at him and could see him, he was just driving and looking, and he did that right there. He knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
So that was probably the best moment, hands down.
So now I want you to think back again, either to your childhood or even in your adult lives.
Right.
Was there a certain driver or even a personality that it really inspired you, or someone that you looked up to pursue this career?
I'll let you take it first.
I will say that, and it is somebody from here local that he passed away in 2021. Mm-hmm. Back in 1992, down in my hometown, Childersburg being my hometown, my dad and I, we were going somewhere, I can't remember, but we were going down Highway 280 going through Sylacauga. And at the time, right now, currently where there's a Ford dealership there, it used to be a Chevrolet dealership. And me being the keen-eyed person that I am, I looked, I'm like, that's a hauler. There's a car sitting by that hauler. Who is that? Mm-hmm. Typically, when you see show cars around, you see a small, anywhere from a 24 to a 32-foot trailer being pulled by a dually pickup truck. This was the full-scale truck with a car. I'm going, whoa, turn around. So he turned around, and we didn't know it was, I saw it was Ameritron batteries and a 49. I'm going, who is that? Well, little did we know at the time it was Chelsea native Stanley Smith. He was a local late model racer. He had dabbled in running cup races, in Busch Series races at the time, just a handful every year. So we stopped, talked to him, introduced ourselves. It was Stanley and his two sons, Scotty and Brett. Hands down, just from that 30 minutes at the front of a Chevrolet dealership, standing in the back of a Featherlight hauler with the actual car that was going to Talladega in a very short amount of time. Wow, I'm actually getting to do this. And I'm 7 years old. So we ended up getting invited to come to Stanley's house, which his shop was behind his house, to do pit stop practice. Watch him do pit stop practice and getting ready for Talladega in a few weeks. From that moment forward right there, with me as a 7-year-old that liked motorsports, you may hear a kid basketball player say, hey, I like Kobe, I like my MJ,
right,
LeBron, anybody like that. Well, from any kid that likes motorsports, you got Jeff Gordon, Dale Earnhardt, Darrell Waltrip, Richard Petty. For me as a 7-year-old right there, Stanley turned into my version of Dale Earnhardt. He ended up, and he authorized it to be done. He wanted me to have my own team uniform. He deemed me, at 7 years old, I was the quality control guy for the car. So before the Michigan race, they were going to Michigan. Dad ended up taking the job. He was going to be the fuel man for the car. So after work, he'd come off after work. He said, all right, you ready to go? And then we would fly from Childersburg to Chelsea and go work at the shop. So from that moment forward, he turned into my Dale Earnhardt right there, my version of Dale Earnhardt, because he was super hospitable. And to this day, I still stay in contact with his kids and his wife. Speak every now and then. Hello, Miss Delphia, sweetest lady you'll ever meet. She'll start contact me every now and then. Just want to see how you're doing. I'm doing great, Miss Delphia. It turned into relationships of people that are now within the NASCAR Hall of Fame that were on that same crew at that time. And probably the biggest moment for me as a kid, it would be the equivalent of like if a kid got to go out on Fenway Park or Truist Field with their favorite baseball player. They were getting ready to do an engine warm-up for the car that was getting ready to go to Michigan. Stanley went and got a chair. He said, hop in. What? Hop in. Okay. So I'm sitting in a seat. He puts the wheel on. He said, all right, cover your ears. I'm like, no, I'm not covering my ears. They fire the car up, and I'm sitting in an actual race-ready car that's getting ready to go on the truck to go to Michigan. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, okay, I could get used to this. But that's the person right there that was the biggest influence on me, was Stanley.
For me, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. You go back to 1979, you watch that original Daytona 500. Richard Petty wins it, and of course, it's the fight over there off of Turn 3 between the Allisons and Cale Yarborough. And I recognize the 88 car. He finished second on that particular race. But shortly after that, 12, 13, 14 years old, I started to realize what I kind of wanted to do. And it was kind of weird. There's this book out there by a guy by the name of Joel Whitburn, who's now also passed away, called Top 40 Hits. But before I knew that that was out there, I would take, and I've apologized to my late mother for this many, many times, I would take the notebooks that she bought me for school, and I would sit on a Sunday morning with my radio on, and I would listen to Casey Kasem's American Top 40, and I would write the entire Top 40 down.
Wow.
So I had probably 3-4 years of American Top 40s in notebooks in my room. Sorry, Mom. But then I thought one day, for some reason, it was like, oh, light bulb moment. Wouldn't that be a cool job? Be on the radio, talk over music, talk about music. Not realizing there's a whole lot more to it than that. But yeah, I thought it would be cool. So like 12, 13, yeah, I started figuring out broadcasting would be pretty cool. And then all of a sudden you start watching races on Sunday afternoons, and one of the most eager guys to talk on a microphone happens to be the guy that I'm a fan of, Darrell Waltrip. And sitting there listening to him and starting to realize that not only can you do what you love, be it racing, radio, whatever, you can also do something else well, but have it all be a part of the same thing. And that's what kind of made me think, at some point in time, I want to try and figure out maybe how I could get into it, because I never honestly felt like I was going to get good enough to do Eli Gold, for example. And I'll get back to him in a minute. I never thought I was going to be good enough to do what Eli Gold does. But at the same time, listening to Darrell Waltrip, I thought, okay, there's a glimmer of hope here. Well, as it turned out, living in Bluff Park, Alabama, in the early 1980s, I need to figure out a way to start making money before I can even get out of high school, so I ain't going to get into radio. So what do you do as a kid? Well, Dad's already got you mowing your yard. You know, I started doing that when I was 10. Well, there was a lady across the street from us who was a live-in nurse for an elderly woman. So for $25 every time I did it, again, early 1980s, I would mow her yard. Well, I did that for the vast majority of a summer, and all of a sudden I see my dad 2 doors down on that same side of the street talking to a lady down there. So Dad comes up, and I'm about to switch. I got to refuel the mower, and I got to go from the front yard to the backyard. He said, when you get done, go down there and mow that lady's yard, and she'll pay you the same amount that you're getting here. Okay. So I went down there and mowed that yard, knocked on the door, got paid. I look at the check. It says Claudette Gold. I didn't put 2 and 2 together at that time. Mm-hmm. I'm just going, and every couple of weeks, I'm mowing our yard and the yard across the street and then their yard. Well, one day I couldn't do it on a weekend, so I come home one afternoon and I do it in the afternoon. And there's a car in the driveway that I'm not used to seeing, but again, it's a weekday. Okay. So I mow the yard, knock on the door. Who answers the door but Eli Gold? And that, having the chance to talk to him, having seen Darrell Waltrip, that just cemented it. That's kind of how I wanted to do it. So between Darrell Waltrip, seeing him on television and meeting Eli Gold, and having turned out followed him because he did PA announcer for the Birmingham Barons, which I did in 2000. He did PA workout at Birmingham International Raceway. He did PA workout at Talladega Superspeedway. I've done all of that. So, yeah, I just kind of felt like I was constantly following Eli Gold's shoes.
Yeah, I love that story. See, because for me, being a little girl, I remember being like 4 or 5 years old and asking my mom, do girls work in football? Genuinely, because my dad was an Alabama fan and my mom is an Auburn fan. So I grew up in a very divided household.
Oh, yeah.
Tons of college. You know, we watched the NFL, more so when we moved to Michigan, but I came from an all-college football household.
Oh, yeah.
My grandfather was a Tar Heel. My grandmother was a Tennessee Vol. My whole dad's side's Alabama. So every weekend, that's what we were doing. And, you know, I always knew my whole life that this is what I wanted to do. But growing up, you know, there was a presence, but it wasn't what it is now, especially in women's sports.
True.
And seriously, I remember asking my mom, are girls allowed to be in football? My mom was like, well, of course they are. And then, you know, that kind of is what sparked the plug for me. And then you start to notice women like Erin Andrews was big in my childhood,
Sure.
Holly Rose, Samantha Ponder,
Yep.
you know, those types of women. So that my story is kind of similar. You know,
Perfect.
just since my first, it's been on my mind ever since. But
All right. Where else would you like to go?
so I was kind of contemplating this question, but
Throw it out
I think
there.
I'm going to ask it. is there, for someone who might not know, again, much about racing, do you think there is a common misconception that people might have that you would like to clear up?
Oh,
Yeah.
I've got a big one.
I bet you do.
I've got a big one.
Yours and mine might actually be fairly similar.
I've got a huge one.
Go for it.
I'll let you go first.
Okay. Especially now, but even back when I first started going out to the Birmingham International Raceway, and I went out there the first time in 1999, and I was supposed to be part of a media race that was going on there, and I'd even practiced a car called an Allison Legacy car, and it basically had the body of NASCAR stock car looks at that point in time, but shrunk down to like 2/3, 3/4 the size, something like that.
Yep.
So I got out there and I was just thrilled to be behind the wheel of a car on a track and was literally slow as Christmas for a 5-year-old. I mean, these cars could do behind the wheel of somebody who knew how to run that car. They could do 22, 23 seconds around BIR, which is a 5/8 mile track. I'm sitting there doing it in 32 seconds. I mean, but again, I'm also a media guy. I don't really know the track. I don't know anything about it. So when I came in and I was told, hey, this is one of those situations, and then I had other drivers who knew the story because they'd come up and talked to the race promoters of BIR. They were coming up and giving me tips. And I'm looking at this crowd, and this is 1999. I'm looking at this crowd of, I don't know, 7 to 10 drivers as I remember. And there's everything under the sun. Okay? There's a young woman there. There's a black guy there. There was a gentleman who looked Hispanic, at least in ancestry, even though he didn't talk it. So maybe he was like second, third generation, whatever. And you start to realize that racing is much more of a melting pot than most people give it credit for. The people that we see at the top levels of NASCAR, the people that we see at the top levels of IndyCar or even Formula One, I get it. They look largely white. But even then, we're talking 25 years ago now, I was starting to see how much racing was becoming a melting pot, and it is going to become even more so. More females are going to get in there, more blacks, more Hispanics, more Asian, more whatever. Pick your particular whatever, quote-unquote, minority. They're coming, and they're going to be there, and they're very talented. They know what they're talking about. And I just sat there and I soaked it up. And when I went back out there again, I went from a 32 to a 27.
5-second pickup. That's good, West.
Yeah, not bad.
Good.
So understand how ticked off I was the next night when everything got rained out on a Friday night. And I hear the sportscaster at the time on ABC 3340 going, well, I'm just going to claim that I'm the defending winner and I won again. And I'm like, dude, I know for a fact I beat the pants off of you in the practice time, and I would have kicked your butt Friday night. So I've never gotten the chance to actually prove that on the track, but I'd still love to do it. But yeah, that right there is probably to me the biggest misconception about racing is that it's just a bunch of greasy old redneck boys.
Right. Yeah.
No, it's not.
It's a massive, massive misconception because, and I have preached this on our weekend show until I'm absolutely blue in the face, and I will continue to preach it until I go die on this hill. There's narratives within certain media areas, let's word it that way, that there's not enough African Americans, there's not enough Hispanics, there's not enough diversity. And I will even go as far as to say, and let's word it this way, if you see which month this is, if you have a lifestyle that you live, let's word it that way, it doesn't matter. If you got the talent to do something, no matter what ethnicity you are, or if you live a lifestyle, if you're talented enough to be in the sport, here you go. Here's the pen.
Yep.
Sign your contract. You're on payroll. Let's go.
Yeah.
I've said it, and I'll say it again. I don't care if you or whatnot. If you live lifestyle, if you're male, female, whatnot, if you're talented enough to work on my race team or drive my car, you're getting a contract put in front of you. I don't care. Today, and I've done a little more walking within paddock areas, pit areas, than he's been able to do. He's done his fair share, but I've done a little bit more. from, I'm going to say 6 years ago to current day, the garage area within motorsports in general is as diverse as ever and is continuing to get diverse. This is a more diverse sport than people perceive it to be. Mm-hmm. Like I said, from if it's an ethnicity, if you live a lifestyle that's different than others, male, female, however you want to categorize it. It's not just the Southern boy, whiskey running, moonshine running, redneck. No. There's more to it than what you see. And if you would get out of your little cubicle that you have in the deadline room in the media centers and get out and walk the garage area, walk the fan zones, walk the outside perimeter, you will see it.
Yeah, it's as prevalent. It starts in the garage area and it will transfer up to the grandstands, and we're seeing that. We have seen that.
Yes.
As it has progressed through at Talladega. We've had the chance to go to Darlington. We've had the chance to go to Richmond. We've had the chance to go to Homestead, Miami in the same PA role. And yeah, we're seeing it at all those tracks where everything is becoming much more diverse when it comes to the fandom. And it's because of the fact that the drivers are changing as well. And,
right.
and it needs to be that way.
Spinning off of that right there, I can give you a quick story of 2020. It was when Talladega got moved to June because of the COVID stuff, and the schedule got reshuffled. Well, Talladega fell on Father's Day that weekend. Okay. He had to be solo up in the booth, but I was right there down by bottom just in case I was needed for anything. And I could just screw it, I'm going up. Well, this was at the time, not 2000, 2020.
It was 2000.
2020.
It was 2020.
This was at the time of when the whole noose incident come about.
Yeah, the Bubba Wallace noose incident.
This was the whole time that come about. And it had been, let's use the word, it had been chirped that there was going to be some Black Lives Matter group come from Atlanta to Talladega, and we're going, okay. Nobody knew what to expect. If anybody was going to just act like, the way I word it, act like straight bulls or act like civilized people. I happen to catch out of the corner of my eye. I see them coming. I'm going, okay. I'm standing here. I've got track shirt on. What's about to happen? There was probably 15 or 20 people in that group. They genuinely came to that racetrack to see what everything was about. They were asking legitimate questions, showing legitimate interest in being legitimate fans. They weren't there to cause trouble. And it all spins back to what I say, what the main cause of a lot of the problems in this world today, social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's where it came from. But that spurned the diversity even more, in my opinion.
Well, and another way to look at it, going off the social media side of it, even to this day, there are people that state that Bubba Wallace needs to apologize for that particular incident that weekend. Number one, no, he doesn't. And number two, I'll tell you why. He was not the person who walked into the garage area and saw that noose. That was a crew member on the number 43 car who alerted Talladega authorities, who then saw it themselves, and they brought in and, the whole thing. Yeah. Was it overblown? Yeah, it was. Turns out that it was something that had been done in the fall race of 2019, and it was just kind of fashioned by a member of the 12 team?
21
team. Thank you. Who had just fashioned it into a pole just to make it easier to pull it down. Well, I saw a picture of it, and I had it at one point in time. I don't have it anymore. To somebody who doesn't really know how much of a difference there is between a rope pole and a noose, looks a lot like a noose. I mean, I'm sorry, it does.
It does.
But Bubba Wallace didn't have anything to do with it.
No.
Number one. Number two, there isn't a driver. There wasn't a driver then.
Nope.
In 2020 who was blaming Bubba Wallace. Every single driver in that, 40-car field that day?
There was a 40-car field. Yep.
39 other drivers that day were all rallying behind Bubba Wallace. None of them blamed him. None of them threw fingers or pointed at him or laughed or anything like that. All the drivers were part of a family that day. Mm-hmm. And the differences are in the grandstand.
Yep. Absolutely.
And that's another maybe not number 2 fallacy, but certainly a top 5 fallacy for me, is that Bubba Wallace owes somebody an apology. He doesn't owe anybody an apology because he wasn't the one that blew the whistle. That's not on him.
The drivers wasn't even allowed to go through the garage area that weekend.
No.
They had to go straight from the motorhome straight to their car.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear that perspective because I remember when that happened. And again, I've mentioned it, like I'm not a huge NASCAR fan. I didn't know much about the sport, but obviously news like that's something that you're going to see regardless if you watch it or not.
Right.
Yep.
But I like to hear y'all's perspective on that.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a fascinating day.
For sure.
And it was something of an eye-opener because I'll tell you this right now. There's very little room for ad-libbing in a PA booth when you're dealing with NASCAR. And I'm sure the same is true. Well, I know the fact that the same is true for IndyCar because there are things that you have to do. Okay? Everything in the pre-race is scripted.
Down to the second.
Very much so. I can show you a schedule that literally has said green flag happens at, and I'm just going to throw out a number here, but I've seen the last part of this specifically. Green flag is going to happen at 2:18 and 30 seconds. And sure enough, you start watching and you time your clocks to NASCAR's clock, that green flag showing at 2:18:30.
Yeah.
They're on it. But there was no script for that day. And like you said, I'm the only one in the PA booth along with my sound tech guy. That's it. Nobody else was allowed up there because NASCAR was way overboard on the COVID rules. And all of a sudden, I get the report, hey, need you to cover this like a news story. Well, that's different. Now I got to put myself in an entirely different mindset.
Yeah.
And I haven't had to do that very often in my life. The only other time I had to do that, and I'm not equating these two by any stretch of the imagination, so don't start to think that I'm thinking that this Bubba Wallace situation is like 9/11. But the only other time I ever had to take off one hat and put on the news person hat was 9/11. Because I was doing traffic reports that day, and then all of a sudden we got word, towers, a plane has hit one tower. But nobody knew anything. I mean, even at that point in time, the company that I was working for had home offices in New York City. And the news that was coming out of there said, we know that it was a plane, but we don't know. It could have been anything from a Cessna to a 747. We haven't found it out. We're trying to find out more information. And then all of a sudden, all the TVs start to go live, and boom, second tower goes in. Now you know. And I went from being a traffic reporter to being a news person. Now I'm going from being a racetrack PA announcer to being a commentator like you would hear on MRN or PRN or ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, whoever happens to be covering it. And it was vastly different. It really was. And it challenged me.
I could tell being right there below the tower. I could tell by how his voice normally is from PA side of it to how it shifted. I went, that's different.
Yeah. No script on that. No script on that.
I knew he was having to wing it.
Yeah.
I knew right then.
Yeah. And he saw me have to do it one other time, and that was 2019 when we went to Homestead, Miami for championship weekend. And I kept expecting the trackside guy to start to take it over.
He didn't. To
do the presentation of the trophy. And he kept not taking it. And I'm like, okay, I've got to continue to fill, and I've got to figure out how I'm going to fill from the checkered flag all the way till the trophy presentation.
And I'm standing here, and I'm running the producer side for this race weekend, and I've got an earpiece in my ear, and I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Keep going.
And I'm like, okay, now what? It does. It challenges you. Now you're thinking on your feet. You've got to figure out exactly what you're going to say. I mean, I was coming up with, and this was Kyle Busch's second championship with Joe Gibbs. I mean, I went all the way back to the beginning of Joe Gibbs as a team owner from 1993.
Yep.
And I detailed the championship from Bobby Labonte in 2000 to Tony Stewart's 2 championships. And I'm coming up with stuff that I had forgotten I knew.
And I remember he cut the mic off and I'm like, what's going on? I said, he's not taking it. Keep going. Keep going. I'm doing that.
So, think on your feet.
Yeah. This will challenge. I mean, doing what we do will challenge you in ways that you never even realized before. And I think that that's partially another a bit of a fallacy is that, there are some people that think that it's all winged, that we're all winging it. No, there's a lot of scripting done, but there's a surprising amount where you actually have to be able to think on your feet. And I've been lucky enough to be able to have that transfer from Talladega over to Barber Motorsports Park, where I've done IndyCar the last couple of years too. And they seem to like me, so I'm going to keep trying to fool them.
Well, this has been fascinating for me.
Good.
Yeah.
We may end up doing this again. There may be a part 2 to this.
Totally fine with that.
Sure.
All right.
Let's do it.
It's the education of young Molly. We appreciate her being a part of it. We hope that you're going to join us on Saturday, again, 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central Time for the 2-hour edition. That'll be on CRN Live on YouTube if you get the opportunity. And we hope that if you haven't already, once this gets posted, whether it's on CRN Live or on Jocks TV on YouTube, that you do subscribe if you haven't already. And we will do this all again Saturday and again next week right here on Crossed Flags.
You've been listening to Crossed Flags, a racing podcast. For more content like this, subscribe to CRN Live on YouTube, and you'll be set to catch the 2-hour live show every Saturday morning at 9 Eastern, 8 Central.
This has been a presentation of the Championship Racing Network.